Good evening. This is I'm Maloba Livingstone, and this is my YouTube channel. Today, we want to have a short discussion on food security in the African context, particularly in the western region of Kenya.
So, what is food security?
In my own view, I want to define food security as having adequate food items to have a balanced diet, 3 meals a day. That's having breakfast, have lunch, and then supper. And on each occasion, you must have a balanced diet. You must have enough proteins, you must have enough carbohydrates, you must have enough vitamins, and good drinking water.
So, briefly explain to us how traditional Africans ensure that they maintained their food production and
In the African context, and in particular in reference to the Iteso, the Luya, and the Luo communities of Western region in Kenya, in most of their homesteads, there were three key infrastructure. One of them was a cow shed. The second one was a banana plantation, and the third one was a granary. These were symbols that indicated a successful homestead with adequate food to service the members of that family. For example, in the granary, all the surplus food materials like sorghum, millet, and recently maize were dried and stored in the granary. In the banana plantation, there are various plants, that is indigenous vegetables like amaranthus, pumpkin, and other locally grown vegetables. You could also find mango trees, guavas, and other local fruits. Then in the cowshed, uh, what there was always a burning fire, and this fire was used to light matches in the subsequent preparation of meals. It could also be used to roast cassava, to roast potatoes, and even bananas that could be used by the young men who are going out to look after cows. Mhm.
we're going to talk about factors affecting food production in current times.
Recently, so many changes have occurred and continue to occur that are now affecting the local situations that ensued during ancient times. For example, one of them is climate change. Number two, the rising population, which is now having an effect on the sizes of land and also constraining access to farm inputs. Climate change has brought about a prevalence of pests, sporadic rainfall, and overpopulation is now also having an effect on natural resources, like forests are now being cleared left, right, and center. Growing of trees that are not controlled, like the eucalyptus trees and many others, are now affecting the water sources, like the springs that were abandoned during those early days. Those communities that are living along rivers are also having an adverse effect on the riparian zones of these rivers, clearing of wetlands, and many others that are now affecting the factors for production. There's also a key element of access to farm inputs, expensive fertilizers, poor seeds, those ones who cannot access the commercially available seeds, among other factors.
So, what can the government do to help maybe in fertilizers or proximity to fertilizers and markets?
Already, most governments have now taken up subsidizing farm inputs, although the levels are still inadequate, but this is a step in the right direction. I would have wished that as a farmer, they also look at subsidizing mechanization in terms of plowing, so that farmers can have access to plowing tractors, maybe at an affordable price, in adequate numbers. But the government has embarked on the right direction, both the county and the national government. And this is what most governments have done in the developed world to develop agriculture.
And what can you say on government importing maize from other countries where it can be grown locally?
In the short term, as measures are being put in place to address what I've just alluded to, I would recommend that that should be taken in as a short-term measure. But in the long term, let it not be a key element in producing food in this country, because there's a lot of land that's lying idle that, if well addressed, we can even produce more and export.
And as a farmer, how what are the ways the government can assist in helping to improve food production?
First of all, is to listen to most of the subsistence farmers, because most farmers have different requirements at different levels, unlike the current blanket issuance of inputs. Like for my case, for example, if I would get the handheld plowing tractor, and then I will do most of my farming, because of my farm, which is small, not a large parcel of land.
Okay, and there's a factor that's affecting most farmers called dependent mentality, in that they expect the government to bring aid from other government. What are the solutions to that?
Like I would have wished that instead of subsidizing these food items, we could have what is called a revolving fund, so that money is allocated occasionally uh, on yearly basis to this fund, so that any farmer with different needs can access this fund, then get the urgently needed input, then return this money without interest. Unlike the case whereby most of us are now being treated to free things, this one are making most of us not to think hard to address most of the problems, and it's a bad precedent that might affect us in the future.
So you're suggesting the formation of self-help groups and circles.
Not quite. I'm suggesting uh, coming up with a revolving fund that can be accessed anytime any farmer, with the approval of maybe the agricultural officers, and like a case whereby it is dependent on the government budgeting cycle. This one makes like for this financial year, maybe a certain amount of money is allocated to a particular item, like for example fertilizers. So there is a rush to deplete this fund, because the farmers are in a hurry, and this one makes some of them not get what they actually need. What I'm having in mind is that let a certain fund be put maybe at the ward level so that any farmer, like if I want a tractor, I require the approval of maybe the agricultural officer coming to my farm and then indicating that I require maybe a handheld tractor, or I require 2 bags of fertilizer, and then through this fund, I go and acquire the fertilizer or the farming implement. Then I return this money after harvesting, or maybe after some duration that is agreed upon.
So,
Like now, what we are having, like the hustler fund. Yes.
so there are other factors like agricultural education, greenhouse technology, irrigation, kitchen gardening. What do you have to say about
Those are
these
very good
factors?
technologies, but most of our farmers are yet to utilize the basic farming practices. Like, for example, planting maize using a rope and adhering to the spacing. Most of us are not doing that. And these are basic things that we were taught in primary school and even secondary school. So before we go to the other advanced technologies, let us strive that to ensure that a huge percentage of our farmers are educated on the basic farming techniques like crop rotation, synchronized planting, relay planting, diversification of crops, control of pests using just simple methods, proper storage of food after harvesting, etc.
So, what are your closing remarks?
Uh, this channel, I wish to start educating my fellow farmers on the basic farming principles. Like on my farm, I'm doing what is called diversified agriculture, whereby even the Bible recommends that a farmer is supposed to plant at least different crops or keep different animals, because you never know which one will fail and which one will do well. And this is just security, and then use proper farm management. So I call all farmers to be on the lookout in this YouTube channel as I continue with this endeavor to educate ourselves and share your questions, share the areas that you feel we should tackle. Then we'll look at them and assist ourselves as farmers so that we can address the issue of food security in our country. For example, Israel is a pure desert, but they have been able to feed themselves because they understand their situation and they are working hard and smart.
Thank you.
Thank you.